We're getting ready to install the cradle assembly in our 65 Mustang. We'll go over the list of the parts here with you. First off is our cradle assembly. Cradle comes black primer. It is optional powder coat if you'd like. Rack and pinion. It's all new. We machine it, assemble it, and test it here in our facility. We have the hardware kit that includes floor mounts, shaft, nuts and bolts to install it, our support bearing and bracket. Next would be our steering column. This one has been powder coated white for our car, but they come in a milled finish that is paintable. They also come in a polished version, a painted black version, or optional powder coat, which we chose. Kit also includes the U-joints, power steering reservoir, it's powder coated chrome, mounting brackets, new power steering pump and pulley. The steering column comes with the dress-up kit, which includes the hazard button, tilt lever, turn signal lever. This is a milled finish, but we also do it in polished. Optional equipment on this kit would be a swivel floor mount. It fits our 65, 66 Mustangs. And last but not least is a power steering line kit. It has a pressure hose, return hose, and a supply line. These are stainless steel braided nylon lined pressure hoses. Also included in the line kit would be the fittings and clamps necessary to connect it. We have a relocation kit, two little brackets here. It'll allow us to move the rack and pinion up on our cradle assembly 1 inch, gives us a little bit more adjustability. This is an option for the cars that need it. You'd remove 2 bolts that hold the clamps that hold the rack and pinion to the cradle. Place this bracket on there, mark the hole in the center, drill it, put it back on here. There's a bolt that goes in the lower hole from the back side to a threaded hole here, and then the 2 bolts that we had in here before will go through and sandwich the cradle and this relocation bracket. It allows us for a little bit more adjustability on our rack for our alignment. It is an option, not all cars need it, but it is available. Hi, we're working on a 65 Mustang V8 air-conditioned car. The original steering, we're going to measure the steering travel. We're going to start by cranking the steering wheel all the way to the right, up against our stops, or as close to it as it gets. We're going to take a measurement from a grease fitting here on the outer tie rod end to a stationary point. Okay, 33.5 to a mark I made on the starter. Okay, it's up against the stop. We'll make our next measurement. We're at 28. So we have 5.5 inches of travel overall from left to right. We're going to start off with just showing you some of the basic front end parts here, standard on all the cars. We have our steering knuckle, we have our outer tie rod end, our adjusting sleeve, our inner tie rod end, our center link, which is supported with the idler arm, pitman arm, which is connected to the steering gearbox, be it manual or power. And then obviously we have the inner tie rod end sleeve and outer tie rod end on the other side as well. Our lower ball joints, our control arms. This is lower control arm bushing, that's a pivot point. We have our sway bar here, helps with body roll. Very important part of this also is our steering stops. Our point in here when you turn left or right, this is to keep the steering from turning too far, tires rubbing frame, and etc. Our goal will be to have it turn as tight as the factory setup. And we're going to measure the ride height on our 65 Mustang. We want to measure from the inside lip of the fender to the center of the wheel. We have 14 inches. Next, we want to do the same with the rear. We have 14 3/4. All right, we have a adjustable coilover shock we have designed for our Mustang. This is to aid in the ride height adjustment of the rear of the car. This is a fully adjustable shock, 19 compression, 19 rebound adjustments. It's a nitrogen filled shock. We have the height adjustment, use a spanner wrench, and you can change the rear height of the car. It mounts in the same exact holes as the factory shock absorber. This is an option that we've chosen for our Mustang. We just had to move it a little bit. Plus it's a nice feature with the adjustability, so we can adjust the ride of the car. Here's a little model to demonstrate bump steer. A front steer car, tie rod ends are going to be in front of the control arms. Driver will be sitting back here. So you know what we're talking about when you say front or rear steer. We're working on the Mustang. This is a rear steer car. If we adjust our inner tie rod end height, right now it's at the same plane as our pivots on our upper control arm, and as we move the tire up and down, our toe stays the same. If we were to mount our inner tie rod end up high and do the same thing, our car, when we have the front end, the suspension loaded like braking, our toe is going to go in. If our pivot point was down too low for the inner tie rod end and the car, the suspension goes up, it toes out. We want to try to eliminate any of that. We want to get our tire so it has no toe deviation from top to bottom in its travel. What we're going to do next is we're going to measure bump steer, and to do that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this straight edge, I'm going to lay it here on the rack. This would be the height from the ground to a point on the bottom of the car, and what we're going to do is we're going to lower the front of the car 2 inches, and we're going to do a measurement of the toe, and then we're going to raise the car 2 inches, and we're going to do a measurement of the toe, plus at the standard ride height we're also having a toe measurement. Our standard at our standard height here, we are at 7 inches from this stationary point to the ground. All right, what I'm going to do is measure the toe at standard ride height. I'm going to use this center tread on both sides. I'm going to measure from the outermost point of that center tread to the outermost point of this center tread, and we are at 58 3/8. Next, I'm going to bind the front end down, and we'll take another measurement. All right, I've pulled the suspension down 2 inches from the ride height. We're going to do that measurement from the exact same points as I did earlier. Our number is 58 3/4 from the same 2 points as earlier. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the car, I'm going to unload the suspension and raise it 2 inches above the ride height that we measured earlier. Alright, next we're going to do our toe measurement with the suspension raised 2 inches from the original ride height. From our same spots that we measured earlier, we're at 57 1/4. Our toe measurement had changed 1.5 inches from the points that we'd measured and the heights that we'd changed. All right, next we're going to remove the stock steering and install a Flaming River rack and pinion cradle kit, and then we'll do those exact same measurements again and see where our numbers are at. We're going to disconnect the outer tie rod ends, drop those. We're going to take the center link loose from the idler arm and pitman arm. We'll take that assembly down, then we can remove the idler arm and the gearbox next. Next, we're going to remove this idler arm. Alright, I previously disconnected the steering shaft from the column. Take the bolts out to hold the gearbox in. Here's all the parts that we've removed from our 65 Mustang that we're installing the rack and pinion cradle kit. Our gearbox, our idler arm, our center link, and inner and outer tie rod ends. We will be reusing the outer tie rod ends on our rack and pinion kit. The kit bolts into the same holes on the idler arm and the gearbox mounting holes. So there is no drilling, it's a simple install. Alright, next step, we're going to place the cradle assembly up into between the frame rails here. I've left the bolts in the holes, so all we have to do is push them through to hold it up. Our gearbox mounted here, our idler arm mounted here, we're going to be using those same holes. Now's when you need a little help from one of your buddies to hold it up in place to get the bolts started. It's a pretty easy job. You can do it in about an afternoon. we'll start with sliding it up into place. Have it in place now. We'll put our nuts on, tighten it down using basic hand tools, and then we'll go through the rest of the steps after that. Alrighty, we've tightened all our bolts, our cradle's in secure. Next step will be installing the outer tie rod ends into the spindles and tightening those down. Put our cotter pins in to secure our castle nuts, and then we'll go to installing the steering shaft and the header. Header will have to go in first. The steering shaft goes through the center of it, so we'll do the header next and then the steering shaft. Alright, we've installed our header, our steering shaft to the column or support bearing. You want to keep those angles minimized so you don't have any steering binding. Always want to make sure that your shaft's dimpled, everything's torqued and Loctited so that nothing comes apart. One thing to keep in mind when you're installing the cradle kit, to keep everything in line as far as these pivot points between the lower control arm and the inner and outer tie rod end, you want to keep those at the same angle. So what we've done, we installed our relocation kit, which moved the rack and pinion up 1 inch and reduced that angle, so it's a lot closer now. That's where our bump steer comes from. So the closer that you can get those angles together, the better the bump steer. Alright, we're going to measure our bump steer with our new Flaming River cradle kit installed and see how our numbers are. Our first measurement will be done with the car standard ride height as before. Our measurement is 58 3/8. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to bind the front end down 2 inches and do that measurement again. Alright, we've lowered our car 2 inches. Now we're going to take that toe measurement again, see what our numbers are. .58 5/8. Now we're going to lift the car 2 inches above the standard ride height and take that toe measurement again. We're going to measure our toe once again with the car in the up position 2 inches from the standard ride height. We're at 57 1/4. We'll see what the difference is between the Flaming River cradle kit and the factory steering system. Our factory steering that was in the car, we had 1.5 inches of deviation from our 2 inches up and 2 inches down from our standard ride height. With the Flaming River cradle kit, we had 1 3/8 inches. We'd improved it by 1/8 of an inch. These cars came with bump steer from the factory. We did improve on that. Next, I want to measure our steering travel. Alright, we're going to measure our steering travel. I'm going to measure from the zerk to the clamp on the cradle here. Our spindle is up against the stop. We're at 16 1/4. I'm going to turn it the other way. We'll take another measurement. Alright, I've
turn the steering all the way the other direction. We're going to take that measurement. We're at 22 1/4. We got 6 inches of travel in our rack and pinion kit. So it's a definite improvement over the factory gearbox, I believe, by about a 1/2 inch on the travel. So that means we're going to be able to turn a little bit sharper. We're going to do our alignment, and that'll be our next step.